Good evening, I'm Pia Hontiveros. This is News.PH, but it's not politics as usual. Disasters should be nothing new to the Philippines, and yet they still are. Yesterday, an earthquake struck Bohol and Cebu and other provinces. How extensive the damage was, we are only beginning to find out. Joining us tonight, Dr. Carlo Arcilla, a geologist, and Robert Michael Poole. And Randall Tiongson will be joining us by phone a little later on. Robert and Randall will be talking about, or they were eyewitnesses in yesterday's earthquake in Bohol and Cebu. The town of Carmen in Bohol was the epicenter of the quake, but damage was extensive in the entire province. Robert Michael Poole will tell us what happened there. He happened to be in Bohol when the quake struck on Tuesday morning. And Robert began to tweet photographs. Robert is Tokyo Drastic on Twitter. And you were like the sole source of photographs of what was happening in Bohol. Did you know that?
I didn't know that at the time. I slightly had a hunch that it might be the case because obviously I was there when it happened. And as I walked around the different locations, I imagined that it would be difficult for some of the journalists to get there. So that's why I thought it would be wise to start tweeting and getting the information out as soon as possible.
You are a journalist also.
I am a journalist, yes, based in Tokyo. Yeah.
Based in Tokyo, and you are the editor of?
Blow-in Art Info. It's a New York-based arts media. We run in 20 countries around the world, so I'm responsible for performing arts.
Okay, but before that you were with CNN.
Yes, previously with CNN covering travel in all around the world. Yeah.
And travel you did, you were in Japan at the time when the tsunami hit in 2011.
That's right, I was there for the March of the 2011 quake as well. Yeah.
Okay, so this is like a normal thing for you.
I wouldn't say normal, but at least not my first experience of it. So I was perhaps more calm than many local people were.
Okay, but you were in Bohol for a vacation, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Just in the Philippines for 12 days to travel around and take some time off.
Yeah, but in Bohol for 2 days or 1 day before the earthquake.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and you were staying, at the time the earthquake struck, you were in your resort.
I was on a bike. I got up early so that I could start riding around the island and see the famous sights, the Chocolate Hills, the Tarsiers and so on. So I was actually already out and about on a motorbike when it struck.
You were driving? Or you had a driver?
I had two people on a motorbike, a local friend who was a guide showing me around. And at first, when the earthquake struck, it seemed as if the road had become very bumpy, and then we noticed it wasn't that the road was bumpy, it was that we saw the electric cables above us start to shake and start to fall down. So we pulled to one side and then really could feel the strength of the earthquake.
What was the movement like? Up and down, sideways, or sideways?
More side to side, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had you ever been through another earthquake before this one?
Well, the one in Tokyo in 2011, I was in my apartment, and that was a very long quake. It started slowly and built up over a period of perhaps a minute.
Okay, but that was like, what was the magnitude of that?
That was 9.0.
Yes.
9.0. So like this one was nothing.
7.2. That's
7.2 is nothing compared to the 9.0.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Well, Robert, you took some pictures, and I wanted to go through a few of them before we talk to Randall. No. So, can you? Okay, you were on the bike, and then you got off because you thought something's funny here. No. This isn't because the road is bumpy. Then you started taking photos right away. No.
That's right. Yeah. We continued on a little bit, just to see, because when you're in an earthquake, you're not exactly sure whether you're in the epicenter of it or how far away it was. So we had no idea at that point to know if it was how strong it really was.
Yeah.
So we rode on just a short distance and quickly encountered that the road had opened up in places, that the first bridge that we came to had started to collapse. So we realized that there was some damage around, and then I thought that the wisest thing to do is to travel on where we can, because cars couldn't travel over these areas because the road was damaged. So we thought that on a motorbike we could still travel inland, see what the damage is like, and see if there's anything we can do.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to be showing some of your photograph. Well, this one is CCTV footage from Cebu, but we'll show Robert's photos in a while. But the day you were there, the day before the earthquake, so you were taking photos already of Tagbilaran that day?
I had just been in Taipei around the evening before.
Oh,
Yeah.
the
So,
evening. Okay, okay. And while you were taking photos, you were tweeting and then you were describing them. What were the thoughts that were going through your head at that moment?
well, I guess as I encountered each place, and it seemed to get more severe as I moved further inland, once I reached Lombok and came across the church, the San Pedro, and the severe damage that had hit there, my immediate thought was people must be injured or worse, because it was pretty severe. I started talking to locals who reported that they hadn't heard of any casualties, and I stayed there for perhaps about an hour and met the local mayor, and then found out that there weren't any casualties there, that things seemed to be okay. But I figured that if the damage there was severe, then if I continued further inland, there could be even worse. So best to go and explore. And by that point I realized that I was perhaps the only journalist around who had the ability to report on it. So that's why I thought it's best to keep traveling and see what else there is that may need to be disseminated through social media.
Well, I'm sure you were the only journalist because all the news outfits, all the media networks were calling you and tweeting you, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was getting thousands by that point, yeah.
Yeah, and then like how many more followers did you get on Twitter because of that?
A few thousand, I think.
A few thousand. Okay, joining us now on the phone is Randall Tiongson. He's a finance advocate. He was in Cebu at the time that the earthquake struck, and he began tweeting photographs also in the minutes following the earthquake. Randall?
Hi, Pia. Hi, good evening.
Hi. Good evening. So
Yes.
you were in Cebu for how many days before the earthquake?
Just overnight.
Overnight also? Okay,
Yeah,
pareho lang kayo,
overnight.
Robert. Okay, so where were you when the earthquake struck, and then how many minutes before you realized what was going on, and how many minutes before you started taking photographs?
Oh, I was about to get off a taxi cab in Ayala Center. There was a building there called Insular Life where I was supposed to have a series of revalidas. And then suddenly the security guard was stopping us in the taxi, and we started to feel a shake inside the cab. So I didn't go down first and waited a little bit while. I was kind of surprised because the earthquake was longer than the usual ones that you feel. And I kind of remember the 1990 Luzon. I said it's kind of similar in that sense. And then, of course, I saw a few minutes after I saw people getting out of the buildings and then the mall. And
this was your very first. Yeah, Randall. Sorry, this was your very first photograph, right? The ceiling.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I did a couple of series, but it's in ceiling.
Okay.
Or I may have taken a photograph of the Starbucks tumblers falling down, I think.
Okay. Well, what made you decide that you should start taking photographs and start tweeting them?
Well, I felt people. I didn't know the magnitude, but I felt that people should know what's going on. At least I know a lot of my readers, a lot of my followers are from Manila. I would want them to know that there was an earthquake going on in the Visayas. So something as simple as that, and just to show people that the earthquake was a little bit more violent and more intense. I had to show the picture of the Ayala Center ceiling falling down and stuff like that. But again, I didn't know how the magnitude was until a few minutes afterwards.
So from Ayala Center, where did you go after that?
We were supposed to wait until we could go inside the buildings, but the security was asking us to stay outside. So we stayed, there's a nearby park in Ayala Center, right across, where they sent a lot of these employees. It was a holiday, but there's a lot of call center agents and the restaurant crews from the Ayala Center were being sent there also.
You went around and took photographs of the churches also, the other buildings, establishments that were affected?
What I did was I went around near just the area from between Ayala Center and the airport. So I saw a few ones like the Cebu Doctors where the front was falling off. And then we passed by the fish port where there's a lot of people who died and stuff like that. We wanted to see also the others, but there were a lot of details already by that time.
Okay. Is there anything else you can share with us, Randall, before we let you go? Because you told me you have a 4 a.m. flight tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm on another plane tomorrow. Well, I was, the mixed reaction. First, I noticed that during the time, some of the security personnel around the area seems to be unprepared. I think I saw some of them running out first rather than allowing people to go out first. So what I noticed, there's I think there must be some training for them. And then there's this trivia. There's this very kind-hearted Japanese who was going around and telling us, there will be aftershocks and like that. He said he was Japanese, so used to the earthquake, and he was giving us very helpful tips. So I saw that and I think people were calm, surprisingly. But again, going to the airport was another story.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Randall, for joining us.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you.
Yeah. Get some sleep. It's a
Okay.
4 a.m. flight tomorrow. Dr. Carlo Arcilla is a geologist, as I said a while ago. Dr. Arcilla, the quake was in origin tectonic, ba?
It's attributed to a movement of the East Bohol Fault, a
East Bohol
relatively
Fault.
unknown fault. It's
Yeah.
not connected.
It had never moved before, right?
There have
Or-
been earthquakes on it, I think, the past 10 years, but not very strong, maybe maximum 6. And the biggest proof of that is that the churches haven't experienced any damage for the past 300 years.
Yes.
In contrast, all of the churches which are close to the Philippine Fault, which traverse the whole country, has experienced some damage in their lifetimes.
Okay. So there is no other fault that is quote unquote responsible
Yeah, we
for this, huh? Because may mga kwentong lumalabas, hindi mo alam kung saan.
Yeah, there's
nagagaling.
one of our fault experts at NIGS is going there to investigate by the weekend to see exactly because it's like a thrust, a hidden fault. That's what the suggestion is, and it's quite shallow. It's about 10 to 12 kilometers from the surface.
Okay.
With that kind of focus, I mean, the ground shaking will be very, very high. So, but it's rather unusual because it's out of line with the main fault that runs across the Philippines, and it's quite strong for something that's hidden.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, it's again from a historical perspective, that's why 1,700, 1,600 churches for the first time suffered damage.
Okay. There is no way, of course, that we can predict an earthquake or we can predict that a fault will move, right?
No, we know that earthquakes are mostly caused by movements on faults, but we don't know when an earthquake
Okay.
is supposed to happen in a fault.
Yeah.
If a fault is active, you know that it's gaining, it's storing some energy. One indication, for example, if it's an active fault and one area of the fault hasn't moved for a long time, it means that it's stuck. And then it's just waiting for something to snap. But when it snaps is a difficult, is the impossible thing to predict.
Is it correct to say that we're going to see the effects of this unfold in the next few days? Because what we have are 100 plus, almost 200 casualties now, no?
Yeah.
Should we be prepared for the worst? Are we going to see something?
I would say that the worst has passed. PVOC has registered about 900 aftershocks, and the strongest one is like 6. By the way, the difference between magnitudes 5 and 6 in terms of energy is 30 times.
Okay.
So you'd rather have 10 earthquakes of magnitude 6 than one of magnitude 7.
Yeah. Okay. Difference between magnitude and intensity.
Magnitude is the energy at the origin of the earthquake. So there's only one magnitude for any earthquake. The intensity is the subjective feel of the earthquake around. So the closer, it's like a light bulb. The
Okay.
100 watts is the magnitude. The intensity
brightest there, and
is
then-
the brightness. If you're closer to the light bulb, you have more intensity. The further you are, then the lesser intensity.
Okay. We'll take a short break. News.PH will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching News.PH on the Solar News channel. I'm Pia Hontiveros. Our guests tonight, Dr. Carlo Arcilla of the UP National Institute of Geological Sciences, and Robert Michael Poole, Japan Bureau Chief of Blow-In Art Info, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's go first to Miguel Ortilla. He is going to be reporting live from Bohol. Miggy?
Yes, Pia, we are still here at the front of the La Señora de la Asunción Church, also known as Taoist Church by the locals here. This church, Pia, sits right beside the municipal hall. It's at the center of this municipality, and you can see still behind me the amount of damage that it incurred. Pia, it's one of the 11 old churches here in the province of Bohol that heavily bore the brunt of that massive quake that happened yesterday. And a proof to that, if you can see this vehicle right here, this is a funeral car that was damaged by the massive earthquake, and the driver is said to have been just lucky by a few seconds. He is still lucky to have made it out just in time before he got buried in that amount of rubble. Now, this church, Pia, was built in 1697. It withstood over 300 years. And reportedly also it's made of coral stone mixed with egg yolk. It is said to be a very strong material, but all of that gave in yesterday in just 30 seconds of that massive earthquake. Pia, Boholanos are known to be very religious, and throughout the day we were staying at this vicinity, and then we saw them still stopping, some of them teary-eyed, and most of them are just staring at this massive structure and the amount of damage that this structure that they revere so much incurred in that earthquake. Now, they're also saying that there's going to be a big effect on tourism. As I told you, here in the province, your old churches is one of the main tourist attractions in Bohol, and the locals say they're already expecting that industry to be affected as well. Meanwhile, Pia, right now, rescue and relief operations have already stopped. It will continue on tomorrow, and if the figure that we gave you earlier was 137 when the rescue and retrieval operations ended, the casualty count just in the province of Bohol is already at 145, and with over almost 200 people injured, and according to authorities, they're still expecting that number to rise. Pia?
Thank you, Miguel Ortilla, reporting to us live from Bohol. Let's go now to David Santos. He's standing by in Cebu. David?
Well, Pia, local government units here in Cebu have recorded several buildings and structures that were partially destroyed due to Tuesday's powerful earthquake. Well, not as much as Bohol experienced, as shown by all the images that we've been getting from that island province, but among all the reports of destroyed buildings here in Cebu, it is this structure behind me, the iconic Basilica Menor de Santo Niño, which apparently has caught everyone's attention. Well, of course, this is not just only Cebu's most famous religious landmark. This is also a historical, rather a heritage site. Hundreds and thousands of people, mostly Catholic devotees, come here every year to pay homage to Cebu's patron, the Santo Niño, or the Holy Child Jesus. History tells us that the original Santo Niño Church was built in 1565, making this as the country's oldest Roman Catholic church. This church houses an image of the Santo Niño, which was handed over by Ferdinand Magellan to the natives in the 16th century. Now, the present structure was actually rebuilt a number of times. The last time was in the mid-1700s. So this building, the materials used to construct this church, is actually more than 400 years old. Security personnel here tell us that regular masses were being held inside the basilica yesterday morning, but when the earthquake struck shortly before 8 a.m., churchgoers scampered to safety and began leaving the mass. Seconds later, the enormous belfry tower collapsed, bringing down massive boulders and stones. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt during the incident, even if a number of panic-stricken people were actually passing in this area while looking for a safe place to stay as the ground shook. Initially, military men were tapped to clean up the pile of debris that has settled in front of the basilica, as you can see. But when national historians intervened, the clearing operation was eventually stopped. Well, according to historians, this pile now is more than just a pile of ordinary rubble. These boulders and stones could actually be considered as artifacts, since these have existed for several centuries and should now be considered valuable part of our nation's history and religion. Now, arrangements are still being finalized on what to do with these debris, although reconstructing the belfry using these same materials remains to be an option. Pia.
Thank you very much, David Santos, reporting to us live from Cebu. David Santos there in Cebu, and Miguel Ortilla in Bohol. Dr. Arcilia, there was a lot of talk about that the churches should have been retrofitted, but this was talk way back late 1990s.
Yeah, but that one happens precisely for the churches that are located to the known faults, that have suffered repeated failures because of earthquakes. Okay. But for these churches, it's the first time ever since this was built that they were damaged. Now, if they're going to rebuild it using the same materials, that fault, if it's active, is going to move again. So I mean, it's just my opinion that you at least have to put some strengthening factors in there.
Yeah, like what? When example, you say retrofitting, strengthening, like what do you mean?
If you notice that most of the buildings are rubbles, because it's basically just stone piled on top of stone. Okay. There are no steel bars, for example, that support. And most of the belfries are the ones that fall off because the center of gravity is higher. Yeah. So they're strong with respect to to carrying a load, but when you have an earthquake, as what Robert mentioned earlier, side to side, they're very weak to resist sheer strength like that.
Yeah, okay. But I had come across an article on the internet written in the late 98 or 99, engineers saying that churches in Bohol should have been retrofitted at that time.
Interesting.
But like you said,
yeah, but the thing with that is that it had never experienced an earthquake this size, and it was not expected because it's been there for 400 years, and the Philippine fault is quite active, and the history of churches being rebuilt is, if you look at many churches, the landmarks show that rebuilt after an earthquake, after a fire, after an earthquake, so repeated. But for the Bohol, this is the unusual thing. It's the first, but they got hit very bad.
So why? What's going on?
No, it's just there's a hidden fault, and then it happened, and then some faults have a very long lapse time before it accumulates stress, and this is what happened here.
Okay, so because we cannot, like you were saying earlier, we can't predict earthquakes when they're going to happen. We can't say when a fault will move, etc. So what's important is risk reduction, disaster management, and the funny thing is, this is what people have been saying for the longest time, di ba?
Yes, but the thing is that first you have to apply it to yourself. I mean, I always say this, I being a geologist, it's kind of funny. People actually, when they buy a house, you ask them, what's the decision for you to situate the house? Number one, maybe the view is nice, the salespeople are very nice. My advice, tell them, if you're going to find a location for your house, especially in a disaster-prone area, you should first see the location in severe weather. When there's incredible rain, floods, so you'll know if your area is going to be flooded. Second, get a GPS, get the location of the house, and plot it against the location of the faults from the website of PHIVOLCS.
Okay. And how far away do you have to be from the fault?
If you're about 10 meters away from a fault line, that's okay. But if you're on the fault itself,
10 meters, puede?
It's like this. If you're 10 meters or 100 meters, if the fault moves, it won't matter much. What will matter is how you build your house.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, here, 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Bohol, 100 people died. In Haiti, I think a few years ago, 2 years ago, a weaker earthquake, 7. Close to 100,000 people died, I think, in that quake. Yeah. And it's because the structure, the building code was not followed. So this is what I'm saying. It's buildings that kill people. It's not earthquakes. And in fact, the model that I heard, that in the worst case scenario here in Metro Manila, the West Valley Fault is the one that's crossing. If that were to cause an earthquake, magnitude 7.8, they said that about 30,000 people could die. Yeah. And they will not be coming from the tall buildings. They'll be coming from the houses of the informal settlers that have no building permits. People who build 2 or 3 stories with concrete without very much support and crowded. So that's really that's a disaster and the horror that's waiting to happen in Metro Manila.
Okay. You mentioned that study. Is this the Metro Manila
the mayors,
earthquake? Mayors.
Mayors.
Yeah, but that was in
2004.
made in 2004. But it's going to be, or it has been updated?
Yeah, tomorrow apparently Dr. Solidum of VVox is going to reveal the updated MMIR study.
Reveal? That sounds scary. Because in the 2004 study, they said about 33,000 people would die in that simulation. No?
Yes.
What is it? What, they're going to say that more people will die?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
Yeah, but the thing is that this is a simple case. If you want to build your house, normally there's going to be building permit. The building permit is for the local authorities to assure that you follow the building code. But to get a building permit, you must have a title to your property.
Okay.
The squatters or the informal settlers have no titles whatsoever, so they just build whatever with no permission.
Okay.
Do they follow engineering regulations? If they're civil engineers, maybe. But some of them, for example, this year I have some money, so I'll build a floor. And then next year or 10 years from now, I add another floor without thinking that the load would have exceeded the safety measures.
Okay. So we only have a problem with squatters? Or, I mean,
Okay,
are you
now,
saying that the building code is really followed?
That's the thing. When you buy a property, then you're putting your hands in the
Your lives in the hands of these,
in the integrity of the people who build in the reputation of the builders. We're praying that they followed the building code. They didn't make shortcuts, and this is the scary part, and because there's very little. There's some ways to check if your building is at risk.
Yeah. How do you check? Hire people like you. Hire the geologists.
Yeah, I mean, of course. Before
I remember that.
Yeah.
I interviewed you several years ago, and you said, "Would you please hire geologists?"
Yes,
to
because the
check?"
thing is that I mean, some people will hire feng shui first for geologists, and I have nothing against feng shui, but you would hire scientists first before you hire someone more esoteric. But what I'm saying is, for example, for tall buildings, if you wanted, because now the last strong earthquake we had is 1968, almost 50 years ago.
Okay.
How many tall buildings have been built since then? Very, very many. So are we going to wait, for the earthquake? Because the fault, the West American Valley Fault is active. That will move. So how do you test if a building will fall or not? One way is what we put accelerometers. When there's accelerometers. These are like blood pressure testing for the veins.
Okay.
You put it in the building, so when the earthquake happens, you will see, even a small earthquake, you will see how the building behaves. And if it doesn't behave very well, then the building will have trouble when the bigger earthquake happens.
Have you done that for
That's
some
supposed to
buildings
be in the building code. Makati was about to implement it.
About to implement
Yeah, I
it?
mean, I was telling Mayor Binay before that maybe Makati should first put it on its own building because it's more than 50 meters.
Okay.
I think they're going to recommend that most of the buildings have that. It's expensive, a few millions.
Yeah. Okay, we have to go, but just last 30 seconds. No, I wanted to ask Robert, what did you think of the way local authorities were responding in the minutes after the earthquake? That's important, because we have National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council, but what's important is the LGUs, hindi ba?
That's right.
I was impressed by the local mayors who came out and set up command centers very quickly in Sagbayan and in Lobok. And I've been impressed today by people who are setting up organizations, one called the Oplan Bangon Bohol. It's a group of people from Bohol who live around who are trying to gather together donations and relief. And they're using social media too, using hashtag Rescue Bohol. If you tweet to that, then they will help to try to get relief and gather donations for Bohol. So I've been impressed by the people who are trying to come together to do that.
Dr. Arcilia, LGUs, how important are they?
No, they're supremely important. Not only so much in the rescue, because you cannot control an earthquake,
right?
But you can maybe help stop future failures, especially in implementing the building code.
Yeah.
And this is it's going to take political will to do this. I mean, it's easy to hand out rise after the earthquake. But it's better to prevent faulty structure from being built in the first place.
And that's what we mean by risk reduction.
Yes.
Right. And disaster preparedness. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Dr. Arcilia. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Robert, thank you very
Robert.
much for being here. And of course, thank you to Randall Tiongson, who joined us earlier by phone. I'm Pia Hontiveros. This is News.PH. See you again next Wednesday. Good night.